So thank you everyone for joining us. Tony Avellino started his pediatric neurosurgery career at Johns Hopkins Hospital. He's currently professor and director of pediatric neurosurgery at the University of Arizona College of Medicine in Tucson. He's a former NCAA student athlete at Cornell. He completed his medical education at Columbia, his neurosurgery residency and later fellowship at the University of Washington in Seattle. In 2009, he was the first director of the UW-Madison Neurosciences Institute at the University of Washington. From 2007 to 2009, he served as chief of pediatric neurosurgery, and then between 2005 and 2009, he was residency program director, and then in 2011, he was appointed chief of neurological surgery at the University of Washington. He later moved to Illinois, where he served as Chief Executive Officer of OSF Healthcare Illinois Neurological Institute from 2014 to 2018. Under his leadership, the Illinois Neurological Institute rankings, net revenue, and contribution margin, outpatient visits, and hospital encounters significantly increased. From 2018 to 2021, he was the Michigan State University Assistant Vice President for Health Sciences, Chief Clinical Medical Officer, and Interim Director of Athletic Medicine. Now, the main reason I invited Dr. Avellino to give us Gran rounds is his deep interest in wellness and neurosurgery. In October of 2019 and January of 2021, he somehow found himself a deckhand on the FV Saga, a commercial crab fishing boat, profiled on the Discovery Channel's Deadliest Catch. The communication and teamwork lessons he learned on these expeditions were surprisingly translatable to healthcare and inspired his commitment to help others achieve a healthier, more purposeful life with optimum performance in mind, body, and spirit. He built his career caring for young people and their families, including a deliberate focus on creating support systems that emphasize performance, health, wellness, and safety. Tony, thank you very much for joining us.
Great. Well, I am very grateful. And so what I hope to do today is talk to you something that's very, very dear to me. I'm honored to be here to, one, share my story. Two is to raise awareness of wellness. And three, hopefully give you a few tools to have a more effective work-life balance, or what I call life-life balance. And so if we were live, the first question I would ask is, how many of you have great work-life balance? The second question I would ask is, how many of you drive your kids to school at least once a week? How many of you see your grandkids at least once a week? But most importantly, how many of you do something that brings you joy once a week? So I assume you are able to see my screen? Yes?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Oh, good, perfect, good. Well, let me start with a story that made a great impression on me. So when I was a young faculty member at the University of Washington, I was invited to the SNS meeting. And I remember going to the University of Wisconsin, your place. The meeting was in May of 2008. But really what left a indelible mark on me is I remember that Dr. Dempsey literally sought me out, welcomed me, and that really left a huge impression on me. It showed me that the compassion that he had, and that's why the University of Wisconsin Department of Neurosurgery Department is so great. But more importantly is Dr. Benny Eskandar has really been a pioneer in pediatric neurosurgery, and he's trained many residents and fellows. But as you go through the journey of life, having these incredible colleagues and mentors and friends is actually really, really important. And so let me tell you about me. So I'm 56 years old. I've battled with stuttering, depression, OCD, and suicide as long as I can remember. I chose to be a neurosurgeon because I sought to live a life to bring healing to those with neurological disease. I completed my training with a tremendous sense of pride. I entered and entered each day with the knowledge that I have given my all. I, similar to my colleagues, ignored the fatigue and underestimated the accumulated trauma of the occasions where you gave it your all, but the neurological disease won. So 13 years ago, September 12th, 2009, my resolve was gone, replaced by fear, hopelessness, and a sense of inadequacy. I lacked the skills to respond to emotions and could not turn for support to loved ones lest I lose their respect. The administrative, clinical, and personal stresses struck down my physical and mental health. I often say that if I knew today 30 years ago, I'd be a lot more at peace. Uh, but I decided to speak up and tell my story in June of 2016. But the COVID pandemic has made many of us experience fear, anxiety, depression due to the isolation, lack of structure, financial uncertainty. And all these stresses have impacted our mental health. And I think the COVID pandemic, what it's done is it gave us the opportunity to pause and really figure out what is important. So today I'd like to share three objectives. One is how to effectively maintain performance, both mental and physical, in a high functioning, stressful environment. Two is how to differentiate between endurance and burnout. Three is how to achieve better work-life balance or life-life balance and lead a healthier, peaceful, and purposeful life. So I'm going to argue throughout my talk that it's performance equals skill minus interference. And what I mean by that, if you're an elite surgeon, elite athlete, elite lawyer, elite whatever you do, you can have all the skill in the world, but if you can't block out your interference, whatever it is, it's difficult to perform at that high level. So what I mean by that is if you're not mentally well, if you're not mentally attuned, if you're not happy and satisfied, if you're not doing purposeful work, if you're not in healthy relationships, if you're not showing compassion toward yourself, it's very difficult to perform. So there was a book by Dan Coyle in '09. And if you've not read this book, it's really a great book because I think as a neurosurgeon, it tells us how do you gain skills. And he breaks it down into three things. Is you actually have to have that deep practice because as a neurosurgeon or resident, you have to practice, practice, practice. Secondly, is you have to have that ignition. What he means by that ignition, you have to have that passion because if you're not passionate about what you're doing, it's very difficult to do things well. But third is I think this master coach, because I didn't get to be where I am today if I didn't have mentors and coaches along the way. And so having that deep practice, that passion, and having that coach. I want you to ask yourself, what does success mean to you? And are you mentally ready? Because I must say that when I was 50 years old, I woke up and I said, listen, I mean, this is great, but I'm not very happy. So what does success mean to you? Is it having a great job, healthy relationships, a spouse, that big car, that big boat? What does success mean to you? So I think as a neurosurgeon, getting back to that performance equals skill minus interference, because I know that in my practice over the last 25 years, the biggest mistakes I made is I had all the skill in the world, but I was not mentally prepared. So who all remembers the Super Bowl 51 in 2017? Who all thought the Atlanta Falcons were absolutely going to win? Right? And so the Atlanta Falcons were winning by 25 points. Tom Brady came back in the fourth quarter, beat them in overtime 34-28. I can argue that Tom Brady was mentally focused. In Super Bowl 52 in 2018, the Patients lost to the Eagles. Super Bowl 53, the Patriots beat the LA Rams. But I can argue that Tom Brady was absolutely focused. Over the last 10 years with an orthopedic surgeon in Seattle, we've been working on something called being awake at the wound. What I want to do is I want to show you a video of my colleague's son. So on the right-hand side, so Nick Hanscom, so he was a competitive mogul freestyle skier. He had lots of injuries, shoulders, knees. He lost his focus. He got a performance coach at he was 29 years old in 2014. He attempted to make the United States Olympic ski team, and he needed to be one of two over 3 days. The first day he was 13 out of 75. Second day he was 11 out of 75. And I'm going to show you his last run. And after I play it, I'll tell you, notice that at the beginning of the video, there's a pause.
Gates are open off this top air. Nick Hanscom on course.
Take it up, take it up.
Hold it.
So Nick ran the best race of his life. Unfortunately, he came in third. But what you didn't see at the beginning of the video, he uses something of mental imagery. And in the snow, he wrote fail. And before he took off the race, he took his ski and he wiped it out. And so Nick was absolutely mentally ready. So the second objective is really how to differentiate between endurance and burnout. So what do physicians need? It's very simple. We only need four things, right? We want to provide quality care. We want to be efficient. We want to have input, and we want to be appreciated. So how many of you have input? How many of you at the end of the day, someone says, thank you for what you do? And I think having that compassion is really, really important. But when we're out of balance, because we need purposeful work, we need input, we want to have a sense of accomplishment, we want to be doing good for others. And I often say is our work in neurosciences revolves around brain health of our patients, and part of maintaining their brain health is taking care of each other and ourselves and striking a work-life balance. I was reading something recently, and it said treating ourselves kindly and compassionately as we would treat a patient can be vitally important to our overall well-being and sense of happiness. So how many of you treat yourself kindly if something occurs? If something bad occurs, how many of you blame yourselves? And I think showing compassion is actually really important. Quinn Studer in 2015 wrote a book called Healing Physician Burnout. And in his book, he goes through 5 areas: the healthcare environment, practical hurdles, psychological challenges, organization, and I'm just going to go through them. But the healthcare environment. So in 2017, we spent over 18% of our GDP on healthcare, over $10,000 per person. Ask yourself, are we providing the best quality care? As we go from value-based purchasing, as we go from volume to value-based purchasing, there's an imminent physician shortage. In 2025, there's going to be a shortfall of 45 to 90,000. Changing patient expectations, and how many of you, when you have patients come to your office, I think I'm getting some feedback.
Yeah, some people were unmuted. I just fixed it.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, and so changing patient expectations, and I think this is important because 20 years ago when I started, you actually saw patients, but I can tell you now, patients come in and very much informed. The internet has a lot of information out there. So now I have patients come in with reams of stuff, and how do you educate them? But 20th century training, I think this is important because I often say that physicians did it to themselves, and we have to find ways to improve upon things, because in the 60s and 70s, there's a lot of self-sacrifice. Sleeping quarters were nearly all time consuming. We lived in the hospital. Pay was meager. You expected to be completely dedicated at all times. And I think the 80-hour work week in 2003 has really changed this a little bit, but there's practical hurdles as well. Physicians feel overworked. How many of you feel overworked? Greater productivity demands, sleep. And I would argue that sleep is one of the most important things that you can do. How many of you get 8 hours of sleep a night? How many of you get 6? And I can argue that sleep is one of the most important things. There's mounting bureaucracy and regulations, regardless if it's Obamacare, Trump care, or Biden care. Little time with patients and too much doing everything else. I think the EMR is good and bad. Because I know that at the end of the day, my work isn't done. Psychological challenges, so missed important events. So how many of you missed birthdays, anniversary? And I think over time, this accumulates on you. Loss of control, rapid pace of change, debt. And I would say that debt is one of the most important things that we need to have a handle on. In 2018, the average medical school debt was $196,000. 75% of medical students had debt. And this creates an enormous amount of stress, but also stress related to the uncertainty around the prognosis that we actually give our patients. Because when our patients are going through really hard times, that really takes a toll on us. I think there's training challenges. So physicians think as I and not we, because I know that when I'm in the operating room, is you're in charge, but I think we really need to think as we. Increasing use of the internet, patient expect miracles, but also the changing attitudes on work-life balance. So without a healthy work-life balance, we're at risk of burnout. So what are the signs and symptoms? And I can tell you that when I was going through my training and such is I wish I knew some of these things, but some of the signs and symptoms are anxiety, depression, suicide ideation, insomnia, apathy, loneliness, marital, family stress, anger, boundary issues, overeating. But what I can say though is even though there's lots of stresses, I can honestly say being a neurosurgeon for a long time is truly an incredible opportunity to help someone through their most challenging neurological disease. And so the benefits totally outweigh the risks. So what are some of the stats? Physicians are more than twice as likely to commit suicide as a general population. Each year, 300, 400 physicians commit suicide. There was a Mayo study in 2015, 7% of employed physicians considered suicide in the last year compared to 4% of other workers. But what's important to me, though, is female physicians are 2.5 to 4 times as likely as women in other occupations. And I think this is really important because I, as a male, understand that females have a lot more stressors than I. Oftentimes they're taking care of their spouse, their kids, their families. And I think we really need to develop mechanisms around this. But also physicians are twice as likely to be dissatisfied. But medical students rated depression is about 15 to 30% higher. And I think this is important because if once you hear my story, is my concern started back then. And when I was running the neurosciences in Illinois, we had in 2016, we had a second year University of Illinois medical student suffered with depression and took his life. And from that experience, we really developed a first year curriculum around wellness. But then in 2019, when I was at MSU, we had a osteopathic student that again suffered with depression and actually took his life. And so really raising awareness and really letting people know that there's help out there is actually really important. So the burnout costs. And so if we have 1 million physicians in the United States, conservatively 40% of physicians are burnt out. We have 400,000 physicians that are burnt out. This is truly a public health crisis, and we need to begin to talk about this. We need to begin to develop wellness initiatives. And I think what the COVID pandemic did is it really brought healthcare systems and departments really that wellness is important. So if you look at by specialty, this is a AMA wire for 2017. Emergency on your left, emergency physicians have the highest burnout rate. Psychiatrists have very, very low rate. But Tate Chanafelt, one of the gurus of wellness that was at the Mayo in 2016 at the annual AMA meeting, he said, if I told you we had a system issue that affected quality of care, limited access to care, and eroded patient satisfaction, you would immediately assign a team of systems engineers, physicians, and administrators at your center to fix the problem. So there were two recent studies. The Maccabee study was neurosurgery faculty in 2015. The Antonello study was residents, neurosurgery residents in 2018. And what it showed that the burnout rate for faculty physicians was 56.7%, and for residents it was 67%. But also it showed that 81% of neurosurgeons and residents say they were satisfied with their career. Some of the factors that were associated with burnout for neurosurgeons faculty were anxiety over future earnings and the ability to achieve a work-life balance. For residents, the factors were hostile faculty and social stressors such as debt. But really, as I lecture around the United States and talk to lots of medical students, really the two things that come down to is debt, but also the second thing is having mentors along the way. And I can't emphasize that as you go through your training program, even as a faculty member, having a really tight-knit faculty is actually really important. So let me tell you about me. So 13 years ago, I was one of those stats. This was September 12, 2009. I tried to take my life. I sat in my car with exhaust coming through. I saw visions of my son. I stopped. I coughed. I hit rock bottom. I am not proud of it. I've been through the EAP program twice, but I never told my story because I was fearful of not being perfect, not being good enough, fearful of losing my job, and not being. And so in 2016, I decided to come forward because I vowed that no one should ever hit rock bottom. But I found recovery through ultra-running friendships and other coping strategies. Expression and acknowledging our insecurities is vital, but it's how we deal with them and find inner peace that's key. So what I want you to do is I want you to all close your eyes, take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. You can keep your eyes closed. And just imagine if you can channel 20% of your negativity into positivity, imagine how much more peaceful you and the world would be. So if you want to take another deep breath in, deep breath out, and then if you want to open your eyes. But I think, starting with that story that Dr. Dempsey showed me in 2008, having compassion is really important. And in fact, there's been studies that babies cuddled in orphanages improves their survival. And in fact, there was a scientific study in 1970 in a rabbit study where they fed rabbits high cholesterol diets. What they found was that the rabbits in the lower cages did better. They had 60% less plaque buildup. They postulated because the lab tech was short and this person touched and patted the lower cages more. And so I think having love and showing compassion towards yourself and others, especially when something goes wrong, is actually really important. But I would not be here today if it wasn't for two stories over the last So the first story I want to share with you, it's the story of Matthew Metcalf. Matthew was a 11-year-old boy that I met in 2003. He had ALL, acute lymphocytic leukemia, was treated with chemotherapy and radiation therapy back then. I met him, he was weak in one side, and he had a gliosarcoma. I removed the lesion. 4 weeks later, the gliosarcoma came back. The dad was a truck driver. His mom was an OR nurse. And his dad reminded me of my dad, who was an electrician for many years. I remember seeing him back in my office, and in 2003, I was young, and I said, listen, I have his recurrence tumor. We need to do everything. Dan Metcalf, his dad, looked at me and said, no. We know what the prognosis is. I'm gonna take Matthew all around the United States in my truck. We're gonna visit all our old friends, and we will see. So at that time I said, "Oh, this is crazy. It's it's important that we do this." So I remember 4 to 6 weeks later, he came back, and remember Corey Hopner, the neuro oncology nurse, said, Tony, remember that boy Matthew Metcalf? I said, yeah. And she said, well, he died. And I said, wow, what a way to die, right? You go all around the United States, visiting all your friends. And I didn't hear anything about it. So that was in 2003. In 2012, I'm sitting in my office at the University of Washington. I get this book called He Chose Joy. It's the story of Matthew Metcalf. And I read it, I cried, I reconnected back. But this is truly a story, has a patient that you couldn't save, that their parents are saving my life. And at that time, I was going through some hard times. So my passion is ultra running. So long distance running is what keeps me connected with helping others, both spiritually and emotionally. During some of my most difficult times of life, I found hope, healing, and purpose on the trails. Ultra races are just like life. You have to prepare, you have to start, you have to work as a team, you have to stay focused, and you have to finish. So what are your outside interests? What brings you joy, happiness, and peace? Is it gardening? Is it reading? Is it music? Is it sports? But really, I mean, having something that you're passionate about that brings you joy is actually really important. So I'm an OCD, ADHD neurosurgeon, and so when I prepare for these 100-mile races, this is what I do, from left to right, what I say to myself, the mileages, what I eat. But you have to have a coach. So again, as you go through neurosurgery training, neurosurgery life, having coaches along the way is actually key. So the lower person, John Rapoltz, when I was a football player at Cornell, John was my head athletic trainer. And I must say that 40 years later, he is still my coach. Harry Truzel is an elite coach in Seattle, and she's been my coach for many years. But on the right side, that's Matthew Metcalf's dad. And Matthew's parents crew for me at a lot of my ultra races. And it's amazing how 15 years ago that I tried to save their kid's life. And to this day, they have changed my life. And I would not be here today if it wasn't for them. In life, you actually need to have a supportive team. I have a daughter, I have a son, I have a wife, been married for many years. And I say my biggest accomplishment is being married for 30 years. But I have dogs, I have horses. So I hate dogs. I just want to get that. So how many of you have dogs? So I can say that Parker in the upper right. I must say that when I was 50, my kids and wife wanted a dog, and I got this dog Parker, and he's truly changed my life. When I come home, he's the first person that actually comes home, and I became a dog hater to a dog lover. But also you have to stay focused. But also if you're having a tough operation and there's lots of bleeding, the aneurysm ruptured, or the tumor, something goes bad, you have to be awake at the wound. You have to be in the present. You have to focus, and you have to finish. In the lower right hand, so that's Matthew's mom and dad. So in life, you have to have compassionate and supportive relationships. And so I was fortunate to actually crab fish, which I actually do. And I must say that when I was going through a tough time, the only people that knew were my wife. And the reason why I fish in the Bering Sea is because Jake Anderson, the in the middle photo. So Jake, when I met Jake 15 years ago, he was addicted to crack and heroin. Him and I became great friends. We spent a lot of time together, and it's pretty inspiring to see the person that he's become. And it's all about developing these compassionate, supportive relationships. Jake is married, he has 3 kids, he owns a boat, and he's doing great. So last thing, what I want to talk about is the second story. And so how to achieve a better work-life balance or life-life balance and achieve a healthier, peaceful, and purposeful life. So Ed Rapp, when I was in Illinois, Ed Rapp I met. Ed Rapp was a former group president of Caterpillar. Caterpillar is a Fortune 500 company. Ed Rapp came back from Singapore, probably was going to be named the next CEO of CAT. 6 months before he was named, he was diagnosed with ALS. Ed is a God-living man. He's very prayerful. He's alive still. But I want to share with you his work-life balance tools. 1 is make a plan. 2, improve efficiency. 3, be a corporate athlete. So first is make a plan. So what's your personal life? What's your personal why? What's your life vision? I didn't have a life vision until I was 50. What is yours? Mine is to be the best friend, dad, and spouse to make this world a better place. What is yours? Sit around honesty, faith, ethics. But also, as you go through setting your calendar is really important. When my daughter was home, I used to go to dinner with my daughter once a week. When my son was home, I used to go to coffee. I used to work out with him once a week. With my wife, I have coffee with her every 2 weeks. It's in my calendar. And if it's not in your calendar, no one knows it's there. You have to be willing to say no. But putting it in your calendar, what do you like to do? What are your family hobbies? And you have to communicate them. Secondly, is you have to have improved efficiency. And I think what I mean by that is you have to pause because I think when you're climbing the ladder, you're climbing, and you don't have time to breathe. And so I think the ability to pause. And when I talk about work-life balance or life-life balance, I have to be careful because it's not about working less. It's about working more efficiently and making priorities for things that are for you. So in the morning, I exercise, breakfast, spend time with your family, walk your dogs. I exercise in the morning because after exercise, I shower. I try to be efficient. I don't want to exercise at night because I don't want to shower twice. Email. Short responses. So how many you get emails and everyone's CC'd on them, and at the end of the day, there's like 50 emails, yes, and nothing said. And so I often say that with emails, if you write me more than a few sentences, I'm not going to read it. And so third is from a technology standpoint. So how many you have iPhones? How many of you sleep with your iPhone? How many of you, when you go on vacation, take your iPhone and check your work email? Why? You have to have time to recharge, and that gets back to having a compassionate, supportive department, having your partners help you out. Because when you're away, you have to decompress, you have to recharge. Meetings. When Ed Rapp was at CAT, his meetings were 30 minutes only, and they started on time, they ended at time. How many of you sit in meetings that go on for an hour or two and you spin, and nothing gets done? If you have these 30-minute meetings, I often say, send me the material, what you want me to review, what's the question you want to answer. 30 minutes after the meeting, the question is answered. Lastly, Joanna, you can simplify your life. Now there's all these apps, there's cooking apps, shopping apps, dog walking apps. So how do you simplify your life? And lastly is how to be a corporate athlete. Because healthy mind, healthy body, happy family. Stress management must be a habit, no excuses. What do you like to do? What brings you joy? Is exercise, mindfulness, meditation, gardening, thinking positive. Setting and managing boundaries. And I think this is really important because this is still very hard for me. So how do you set and manage or separate your work and your personal life? And if you're on call, great, you have to be all in. But separating that work and personal life. So when you're driving home at night, is there a spot that you watch for that you sort of turn things off? Because I can say that I was not the best dad because I was on all the time, and when I was home, I wasn't absolutely present. So setting and managing that boundaries. But lastly, what Ed taught me is you get to choose what type of day you have. You get to choose what type of day you have. So tomorrow morning, promise me when you wake up, you're going to say, I'm going to have a great day. Some days are better than others. But if you wake up angry at your spouse, your kids, your dogs, you come to work, you're angry, screaming, your day's shot. So you get to choose what type of day you have. And last thing, my wife and I made up, developed. So life is like a marathon, but your tactics. What I mean by that is T is take time for yourself and lead a peaceful life. A, always eat healthy, exercise, and sleep. I would argue that sleep is one of the most important things that you can do. C is continually self-improve and remain. It's important to take feedback. T is treasure family and friends. I choose the day I have. C, control disappointments and respond positively. And S, smile and laugh. Because as you go through the journey of life, you're going to have these ups and downs. But lastly, we must all listen, learn, and heal with each other to achieve a healthier, peaceful, and purposeful life with optimum performance in mind, body, and spirit. We must always remember you're never alone. And we must find hope even in the darkest moments, for the lessons learned give us insights on how to bring light to others. And last thing I just want to end with, because when I was going through a tough time, one of my colleagues in Houston, Dr. Brits, his mom is from South Africa, and Gavin and I have been very close friends for a long time. But his mom sent Gavin this, and Gavin sent it to me. So what I want to do is I want to read it to you, and then I'll end things. So life is like a journey with its stations, with changes of routes, with accidents. We board this train when we are born, and our parents are the ones who get our ticket. We believe they will always travel on this train with us. However, at some station, our parents will get off the train, leaving us alone on the street. As time goes by, other passengers will board the train. We will be chickens, many will get off during the journey. Many will go so unnoticed that they don't even know the season. This train ride will be full of joy, sorrow, fantasy, expectations, hopes, goodbyes, and holidays. The good journey is helping, loving, having a good relationship, following compassion, and give her the best to make her life. This mystery of this fabulous journey is we do not know which station we ourselves are going to get off. So we must live in the best way and just the way. It's important to do this because when the time comes for us to leave our seat, we should leave behind beautiful memories for those who will continue to travel on the train ride. Thank you for being one of the passengers of my train. Don't know where my station will come. Don't want to miss saying thank you. So I just like to say, if you have a colleague in need, it's important to take your doctor's hat off and listen, because listening, you can truly save a life. So thank you for listening. And I hope I've provided you a few tools to have a better life balance. Because I often say that if I knew today, 30 years ago, I'd be a lot more, I would be a lot more at peace. So with that, last thing is I just want to thank Benny because he's been an incredible force in the pediatric neurosurgery. But as you can see, stories really resonate. And that story with your chair, Dr. Dempsey, I'm sure he does not remember that, but 15 years later, that really left a mark on me. So thank you for what you did.
Thank you, Tony. That's a brave, brave story. And it's very important that people like you are kind enough to share, because we all go through the same world together. And there's so many lessons to learn from each other. So thanks on behalf of all of us for taking this time. We
Oh,
really
sure.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.